Right, let's continue. I'm doing these in short bursts because I don't want the videos to be really, really big. These file size to be huge. So we're continuing with our paragraph or passage on hurricanes. We're looking at the second paragraph now. So we are on to this one that says the sheer power of a hurricane. So remember what we're doing, reading the paragraph first to find out what it is about. So the sheer power of a hurricane is enough to strike terror into the bravest heart. But those who have lived through a hurricane note another dimension. Many people report that the hurricane seems to come somehow alive. Nearly a century ago, renowned British author Joseph Conrad, who had spent years at sea in the days of sailing ships, put it this way. An earthquake, a landslip, an avalanche overtake a man incidentally, as it were, without passion. A furious gale attacks him like a personal enemy, tries to grasp his limbs, fastens upon his mind, seeks to rout his very spirit out of him. Right, so remember our question? Who or what is doing what in this paragraph? What is it that is happening? What are the actions that are taking place in this paragraph? So to find out what, we look for the verbs and then we try to figure out who or what is acting, who or what is doing something. But we already know that the hurricane is the agent. We know the hurricane, the disaster bringing hurricane is the agent, right? That's what the paragraph is going to be about. So let's check this out. So the sheer power of a hurricane is enough to strike terror. So my verb is to strike terror into the bravest heart. The whole to strike terror is like the verb. Yeah, striking terror is the verb. The whole verb phrase would be to strike terror into the bravest heart, right? You could, depending on your interest, you could show the children to do the whole thing, or you could just say to strike is the, if you want to be a purist, well, to strike is the verb, the infinite form of the verb. To strike terror would be more like the noun phrase. This whole piece here would be the noun phrase. So what is happening? What is it that's happening here? The sheer power of the hurricane. I was using, which one was you? I've forgotten again. Right, this is the subject. And this thing here is the action. This is what it is doing. So the power of the hurricane is striking terror into even brave people's hearts. That's what is happening, right? So we could probably do something like hurricane and is striking terror. It says what's what it is? Strike terror. Alright, so hurricane strike terror goes on to say so it's strike terror in the bravest heart. Then it goes on to say those who have lived through a hurricane note another dimension, right? So we don't really, for every sentence, we don't need to finely analyze every single sentence. We basically just have to know what are the major actions happening, right? In this sentence here, those who have lived through a hurricane note another dimension. In other words here, who or what is doing what? Well, survivors, those who have lived through, could be those who have lived through will be the survivors, right? Survivors of hurricane, so hurricane survivors also do something. What do? They talk about another dimension to hurricanes in addition to the terror. So many people report. So who's the subject here? Many people. Many people is the who. The who. What do the who do? They do something. They report. What are they reporting? That the hurricane seems to come somehow alive. So the hurricane does something. It comes alive. Interesting. Yeah, it comes alive. So then we get this piece now. Nearly a century ago, renowned British author Conrad, who had spent years at sea, put it this way. Alright? So, who or what is doing what? Joseph Conrad, this is the who, this is the appositive part of the sentence. It tells you about who Conrad was. So what is doing what? Conrad, an author, who was a sailor, by the way, said. What is this telling us? This whole piece is telling us what Conrad said based on his experience as a sailor, right? He said an earthquake, a landslip, an avalanche, these things overtake a man. Right? They do it without passion. But a furious gale does something. It attacks like an enemy. Attacks him like an enemy. It grasps his limbs, fastens his mind, seeks to rout his spirit. Okay? So notice the verbs that we have here, right? So this is what Conrad is saying, that he's contrasting earthquakes, landslips, avalanches. He says those things just kind of, they kind of overtake you, but they don't really seem to have much bad mind involved, right? But a furious gale, notice the adjective here. Notice the adjective, people. The gale is the subject, and in this, right, subject / noun, and qualified by saying it's a furious gale. What does it gale do? Notice the verbs associated with it. Attacks, like an enemy. It attacks, it grasps, it fastens upon his mind, and like hold you like in a hand, and it looks as though it's trying to rout your very spirit. So, look at what I'm going to do. I know, look at the verbs. Can a gale attack somebody like an enemy? Can a gale grasp you with your hands? What do you need in order to grasp something? You need hands, right? To fasten upon his mind, to fasten upon me, you need hands. And to rout your spirit out of him, I suppose needs some kind of motivation and evil intent, yes? So based on the verbs, people, based on the verbs here, I am picturing the hurricane. I am picturing the hurricane as a sort of, very evil character. It's a sort of evil character. So that's what the hurricane is doing. Attacks like an enemy. It seeks to rout. It fastens on his mind. It shakes. Notice what it says here? Sorry, I have the wrong thing. It grasps his limbs. Yeah. Grasps his limbs, fastens his mind. Right. Fastens upon his mind. So this is what the hurricane is doing. It's like a person. So this is where you get the use of personification. Okay, so the author is personifying the hurricane in its ability to do something, right? So it strikes terror. It comes alive. It's personified, right? It comes alive, and it seems to have some kind of, it appears to have some kind of vendetta against people. Yes? So the conclusion I can come to, I can infer therefore that the author thinks that a hurricane could be malevolent. When I look at the words, when I look at the things that that Conrad says the hurricane is doing, all right, he personifies it, and personifying it allows him to then focus on the negatives. The fact that it strikes terror and does all of these things. My conclusion, I can infer that he thinks, and the author thinks, maybe, that the hurricane is malevolent. It is driven by the desire to hurt, damage, and rout everything. Does that make sense?